The blade hung in the center of the room. It was old. Very old. Older than any civilization in the galaxy. Its metal was dark and strange, seeming to drink in the light around it rather than shine. No one knew where it came from. No one knew what it could do, but everyone feared it. Commander Vexler stood tall before the gathered officers. His blue skin reflected the dim lights of the memorial hall aboard the Galactic Council's flagship. His forearms were crossed tightly across his chest, showing how serious this matter was. "This weapon is dangerous beyond your understanding," he said, his deep voice filling the silent room. "It has destroyed entire worlds. It has ended civilizations that were mighty long before any of your species learned to make fire." The officers from 17 different alien species shifted uncomfortably. Some had tentacles, some had wings, some had too many eyes or not enough. But all of them felt small before the ancient blade. "The humans call it Excalibur," Vexler continued, "a name from their stories. But this is no story. This is real, and it is deadly." At the back of the room, Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood quietly. She was the only human present. Next to the tall, powerful aliens, she looked small and weak, but her eyes never left the blade. Something about it called to her in a way she couldn't explain. "Under no circumstances is anyone to touch this weapon," Commander Vexler ordered. "It stays in this stasis field. It stays contained. The consequences of removing it would be ... Double quotes. He paused, his compound eyes sweeping the room, beyond imagination. After the meeting, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the blade. That night, she walked the empty corridors of the massive ship, her mind troubled. Why did the blade seem to call to her? And why did she dream of holding it? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden blaring alarm. Red lights flashed throughout the ship. The emergency system announced. "Warning. Unknown vessels approaching. All personnel to battle stations." Sarah ran to the command center. The main screen showed what looked like tears in the fabric of space itself. From these tears emerged ships unlike any she had seen before. They were massive, black, and seemed to bend the light around them. "The Void Armada," whispered an officer next to her. "They found us." Commander Vexler's voice boomed over the ship's communication system. "All non-essential personnel to evacuation pods. This is not a drill. The Void is returned." Panic spread through the ship. Sarah knew she should report to her station, but her feet carried her elsewhere. Before she realized what she was doing, she was standing in the memorial hall, alone with the blade. The ship shuddered as the first attacks hit. The lights flickered. In that moment of darkness, Sarah made her decision. She approached the stasis field, her heart pounding in her chest. Everything she had been taught told her to turn around, to follow orders. But something deeper, something she couldn't explain, told her this was right. "I'm sorry, Commander," she whispered, reaching her hand toward the glowing field. Her fingers passed through the stasis barrier like it wasn't even there. The moment her skin touched the ancient hilt, a surge of energy rushed through her body. Images flashed in her mind, stars being born, worlds dying, battles fought across the cosmos. The blade recognized her. Not as human, but as something it had been waiting for. As Sarah lifted the weapon from its resting place, it began to glow with a soft blue light. The ship rocked again from another attack, but Sarah stood steady, the blade firm in her grip. She didn't understand why, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Taking this blade was the only hope the galaxy had left. The moment Sarah's fingers closed around the ancient hilt, the world around her changed. The blade's blue glow pulsed through her veins like liquid starlight. Knowledge not her own flooded her mind, battles fought in forgotten corners of the universe. Civilizations that had risen and fallen before Earth's sun had even formed, and promises made by beings who had sacrificed everything to protect reality itself. The ship shuddered again as another attack hit. Sarah barely noticed. The blade felt impossibly light in her hand, as if it weighed nothing at all, yet she could feel its power, ancient, patient, and terrifyingly vast.
"Hey, what have you done?"
Commander Vexler stood in the doorway, his forearms spread wide in horror. His compound eyes reflected the blue fire of the blade, making him look like a creature from a nightmare. Two of his hands reached for the weapons at his sides. "You must put it back," he said, his voice shaking. "You don't understand what you've done. That weapon isn't meant for your kind. You've doomed us all." Sarah looked at him calmly, feeling strangely peaceful, despite the chaos around them. "No," she said softly. "I've given us a chance." The blade whispered to her, not in words but in feelings and images. It showed her the truth about the attackers, the Void Armada. They weren't just enemies. They were something far worse. They existed partially outside normal space, feeding on reality itself. They had consumed countless worlds, countless galaxies. And the Council's weapons, for all their advanced technology, were useless against them. But the blade remembered them. The blade knew how to fight them. "I need a ship," Sarah said, stepping toward Vexler. "The smallest, fastest one you have." The commander backed away, his skin changing color with fear. "You can't possibly think you can fight them alone. Armada will destroy you in seconds." "I don't plan to fight them, not yet." The blade showed her where she needed to go, a place between stars, a wound in reality that had never fully healed. "Either help me, Commander, or get out of my way." Something in her voice, or perhaps the way the blade's light seemed to bend around her, made Vexler hesitate. He had served the Council for 200 years. He had always followed orders. But he had also read the ancient texts, studied the prophecies that most dismissed as myths. They spoke of a time when darkness would return to devour the stars. They spoke of a weapon that would choose its wielder. They spoke of a small being who would raise the blade when all hope seemed lost. Another explosion rocked the ship, throwing them both against the wall. The emergency lights flickered and died, leaving only the blue glow of the blade to illuminate their faces. "The hangar bay," Vexler said finally. "Level 7. There's a scout ship. It's fast. It might get you past them." Sarah nodded, feeling the blade's approval. As she moved past him, Vexler caught her arm with one of his hands. "The Council lied to us," he said quietly. "They told us the blade was a weapon of destruction. That's not true, is it?" Sarah looked down at the glowing metal. Through it, she could feel the sacrifice of those who had made it their love for a universe they knew they would never see again. She whispered, "It's a key, a promise, maybe our last hope." She ran through the darkened corridors, the blade lighting her way. All around her, crew members were rushing to evacuation pods or battle stations. None tried to stop her. Perhaps they didn't notice her in their panic. Or perhaps the blade somehow kept her hidden from their eyes. In the hangar bay, she found the scout ship small, sleek, and built for speed rather than combat. As she placed her hand on the entry panel, the ship responded to her touch, powering up without codes or authorization. The blade was opening doors for her, preparing her path. As Sarah strapped herself into the pilot's seat, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the view screen. Her eyes glowed with the same blue fire as the blade. Whatever she had been before, human, lieutenant, daughter of Earth, she was something more now. She was the blade's chosen. And she was about to take the fight to an enemy older than time itself. Sarah's stolen scout ship sliced through the darkness between stars, leaving the massive Galactic Council flagship behind. The blade rested beside her in the co-pilot's seat, its blue glow filling the small cockpit with strange light. It no longer needed to be held to guide her. It spoke directly to her mind now, showing her paths through space that no map had ever recorded. These hidden routes existed in the thin places between normal space and somewhere the Council's scientists had never discovered. The ship moved faster than should have been possible, the stars outside blurring into streaks of light. Behind her, the Void Armada gave chase, their massive ships tearing reality as they followed. "They sense the blade," Sarah whispered to herself. "They fear it." For 3 days, she barely slept. When exhaustion finally claimed her, she dreamed strange dreams. She saw the blade's creation, forged not by gods or heroes, but by ordinary beings who had stood together at the dawn of time. They had sacrificed everything to seal the void away when it first threatened to consume all of reality. The blade was their legacy, their final hope that someone would understand when the void inevitably returned. Sarah woke with tears on her face. The blade wasn't a weapon meant to destroy. It was a tool of creation, of binding, of healing the very fabric of existence. On the 4th day, her ship's sensors detected another vessel following her. It was smaller than the void ships, moving along the same hidden path she traveled. At first, she prepared to run, thinking it might be Council forces sent to retrieve the blade. But then, a transmission came through. Lieutenant Chen. This is Commander Vexler. Sarah stared at the communication screen in shock. The four-armed alien looked tired, his usually bright blue skin now pale and dull. Commander, how did you find me? I followed the Blade's trail, he said simply. The Council, ... They lied to all of us. I've served them for 200 years, believed in their wisdom, but I've also studied the ancient texts. I know the prophecies that speak of a small being who would raise the Blade when darkness returned. Sarah felt the Blade pulse beside her, as if confirming his words. The Council feared the Blade, Vexler continued. They feared anyone who might wield it would become too powerful, so they hid the truth, locked it away, told us it was a weapon of destruction. It's not about power, Sarah said softly, understanding now what the Blade had been showing her. It's about sacrifice. Vexler's compound eyes seemed to soften. Yes, that's what the texts say. The first wielders gave everything to seal the void away. Now, ... double quotes, and now it must happen again, Sarah finished for him. For the next week they traveled together toward the edge of charted space. The Void Armada followed relentlessly, sometimes falling behind when Sarah and Vexler used the Blade's hidden paths, but always finding them again. The Blade was drawing them all toward a specific point, to place the ancient texts called the Schism. In her dreams, Sarah saw it clearly now, a tier in reality where the Void had first entered their universe eons ago. It was there the Blade needed to be raised. It was there the seal could be remade. But each night, her dreams showed her more of what that would cost. No one had ever returned from such a journey. The wielder's life force was needed to power the sealing. On the final night before they would reach the Schism, Sarah sat alone in her ship, the Blade glowing softly beside her. She thought of Earth, of her family, of the life she had planned before all this began. She would never see any of it again. Are you afraid? His voice came through the communication system. Sarah looked at the Blade, feeling its ancient sorrow and its timeless hope. Yes, she admitted. But some things are worth being afraid for. Outside their ships, the stars seemed to dim as the Void Armada drew closer. Ahead lay the Schism and destiny. Sarah placed her hand on the Blade, feeling the memories of all who had carried it before her. Tomorrow, she whispered, both to Vexler and to the Blade itself. Tomorrow, we finish this. The Schism hung before them like a wound in the fabric of reality itself. It wasn't black, it was the absence of everything. A tear in existence that hurt Sarah's eyes to look at. Around its edges, space itself seemed to bend and warp, as if reality was trying desperately to heal, but couldn't quite manage it. We've arrived, Sarah whispered. Though there was no one to hear her except the Blade, pulsing with blue fire beside her. Her small scout ship hovered at a safe distance, sensors screaming warnings about the impossible readings they were detecting. Behind her, Commander Vexler's vessel maintained position, its lights dim against the vastness of space. Can you feel it? Vexler's voice crackled through the communication system. The Void. It's watching us. Sarah could feel it. Beyond the Schism waited something ancient and hungry, patient and cruel. The Void wasn't just darkness. It was the enemy of existence itself. A consciousness that fed on reality, consuming worlds and stars and entire galaxies. They're here, Vexler said suddenly, his voice tight with fear. Sarah's sensors confirmed it. The Void Armada had caught up, their massive ships surrounding the two tiny vessels in a sphere of darkness. They made no move to attack. They were waiting, curious perhaps about what these small creatures intended to do. Then a voice filled Sarah's mind, cold and vast as the space between galaxies. You cannot seal us away again, little one, it said, the words feeling like ice in her veins. We have grown stronger. Your blade is the last of its kind. There are no more wielders after you. Sarah's hands trembled on the controls. The blade showed her what must be done. She would need to enter the Schism itself, use her life force to power the sealing. The original wielders had done it together, hundreds of them combining their strength. She was just one person. I'll create a diversion, Vexler transmitted suddenly. My people have a saying, the stars remember those who die for them, Vexler. No, Sarah began, but the commander cut her off. I was wrong about humans, he said, his voice gentle now. I thought you were weak, too young to understand the universe. But the blade chose you, Sarah Chen. Not me. Not any of the Council's great warriors. You. Sarah watched in horror as Vexler's ship accelerated toward the nearest void vessel, weapons firing. It was suicide, but it would give her the moments she needed to reach the schism. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if he could hear her anymore. Sarah grabbed the blade and held it tight as she guided her vessel toward the schism. The ship's systems began to fail as they approached the tear in reality, alarms blaring warnings she ignored. The blade grew brighter with each passing second, almost too brilliant to look at directly. The memories of its previous wielders flowed through her, their courage, their determination, their love for a universe they would never see again. They had been ordinary people, just like her, scared but determined, alone but united in purpose. "I understand now," she whispered to the blade as her ship crossed the threshold into the void. This was always the price. The moment they entered the schism, her ship disintegrated around her. But Sarah didn't fall. She stood on what seemed like solid ground yet wasn't, the blade blazing in her hands. The void surrounded her, curious about this small creature who dared to face it. "You are alone," it said, its voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. The others had armies, civilizations behind them. You have nothing. Sarah looked down at the blade, its light the only thing visible in this place beyond reality. She thought of Vexler's sacrifice. She thought of Earth, so far away now. She thought of all the worlds and people she would never see. "I'm not alone," she said, raising the blade high above her head. Its light expanded outward, forming a pattern of ancient symbols around her. Each one represented a seal, a binding that would once again lock the void away from their reality. The void seemed to recoil from the light, its voice becoming a scream of rage and fear. "You will die here," it warned, forgotten, alone. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the blade's power flow through her. Her life force began to drain into it, feeding the seals that were forming. It hurt more than anything she had ever experienced, but she held on. Some prices she gasped through the pain are worth paying. And with the last of her strength, Sarah Chen brought the blade down. The blade came down with a force that seemed to split reality itself. As it struck the nothingness beneath Sarah, light erupted from the point of impact. Not the soft blue glow that had guided her here, but a blinding white radiance that spread outward in waves. The ancient symbols around her blazed to life one after another, forming a complex pattern that stretched as far as she could see. The void screamed. It was a sound beyond sound, a vibration that shook Sarah to her very core. The darkness around her began to retreat, pushed back by the expanding light. The schism, the wound in reality that had allowed the void entry, began to close, its edges knitting together like healing flesh. Sarah felt her life draining away, flowing into the blade and feeding the seals. Her vision dimmed. Her body felt impossibly heavy. This was the sacrifice the blade required, had always required. A willing soul to power the binding. "It is not enough," the void hissed, its voice fading but still terrible. "You are just one. The first wielders were many. The seal will not hold." Sarah's knees buckled. The blade felt heavier with each passing second. She was dying and she knew it. But the sealing wasn't complete. The void was right. She wasn't strong enough alone. Then, impossibly, she felt a hand on her shoulder. "Not alone," said Commander Vexler's voice. Sarah turned her head, struggling to focus. Vexler stood beside her, his form translucent and glowing. Behind him stood others, hundreds of them, beings of every shape and size, some humanoid, some utterly alien. The previous wielders of the blade, their spirits preserved within it across the eons. "We stand with you, Sarah Chen," Vexler said, placing one of his 4 hands over hers on the blade's hilt, "as we have always stood with those who fight the darkness." One by one, the spirits of the ancient wielders stepped forward, each adding their strength to hers. The blade grew brighter, drawing power not just from Sarah now, but from all of them together. The void howled as the light pushed it further back. "This cannot be." "It already is," Sarah whispered. With one final surge of power, the blade completed its work. The schism sealed with a sound like thunder. The void armada, caught between realities, was pushed back into the nothingness beyond, trapped once more behind the barriers the first wielders had created. In that final moment, as the last of the seal formed, the ancient blade, having fulfilled its purpose, at last shattered into 1,000 glittering fragments. Each piece carried a spark of its power, scattering across the universe like stars being born. Sarah closed her eyes, ready for the darkness. She had done what she came to do. The sacrifice was complete. But death did not come. Instead, she felt herself falling, then floating. Then, standing. She opened her eyes to find herself on the bridge of the Galactic Council's flagship. Her hands were empty, raised where the blade had been. Round her stood council members from a dozen species, all staring at her in shock. And beside her stood Commander Vexler, solid, real, alive. "How?" Sarah began, her voice barely a whisper. Vexler looked as confused as she felt. "The prophecy," he said slowly. "I never read the final verses. It didn't end with sacrifice. It ended with rebirth." Sarah looked down at her hands. Though the blade was gone, its light remained within her. She could feel it flowing through her veins, a warm glow just beneath her skin. And not just in her and Vexler too, she realized, and in others throughout the ship, throughout the galaxy. The blade hadn't just sealed away the void, it had shared its power with all living beings, ensuring that if darkness ever returned, they would face it together. No single wielder would ever have to bear the burden alone again. "The blade is gone," one of the council members said, his voice trembling. "What have you done?" Sarah smiled, feeling the light inside her pulse in time with her heartbeat. She thought of all the previous wielders, their spirits finally at peace. She thought of the void, sealed away once more. She thought of all the worlds that would continue, all the lives that would go on. "Something better than fighting darkness," she said softly. "I've helped us learn to carry the light." Outside the viewport, the stars seemed brighter somehow. Somewhere among them, the scattered fragments of the ancient blade waited, ready to be found by those who would need them next. Not as a weapon, but as a reminder that even the smallest being can change the fate of the universe. And that some battles are won not by those willing to kill, but by those willing to sacrifice everything for what they love.